Here is my first blocking pass for the scene, and I haven't touched any of the facial controls on Gwen.
Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What?
So that's about as far as I want to go with the body without touching the face, because I may find that if I keep going animating the body without any direction in the eyes or in the face, I might start over-animating the body. It's easy to take for granted how much information and how much texture we can get out of the facial performance if we ignore it during our blocking phase. So at this point, I at least want to go in and do a pass on the eyes, eye direction, maybe some blinks, but just to show a little bit of intention, a little bit of thought process in her performance. If you look at the scene in Maya here, you can see I've actually blocked out her whole body, even though this is just going to be a facial animation performance, a close-up for most of the scene.
Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What?
The reason I've blocked the whole body, even though we don't see it in camera, is because whatever's happening down with her root and with her feet, we're going to feel it up in the close-up with the way that her head moves and shifts in the frame. And I don't want it to feel like, she's sitting down or she's frozen from the chest down. I want it to feel like she's actually standing, like she has weight. So for me, the solution to this is to animate the whole body, and then hopefully whatever happens in camera will just feel very natural. So I've put just enough work in here to hopefully get a sense of the energy and the weight and a little bit of texture on the head patterns. There's still a lot of spacing in here that's very even, a lot of things I need to tie down and polish as far as the physicality, but I feel like there's enough there that I can go in and start layering in some facial animation and start to feel the entire performance. I'm not going to worry about lip sync just yet, I just want to put in some basic face shapes. I've done a pass at animating her eye direction for the entire shot. I haven't changed any of the attitudes in the eyes yet, so it's just the default eye shapes. But I have added in a few blinks and just the general eye direction. And to do that, I like to use the AMAT target for the eyes that's independent of the head direction. That way I can have her eyes fixed on something and the head can animate and the eyes will stay focused. So it just makes her feel more alive than if the eyes traveled with the head as it moved. That said, it's not a perfect solution. On most CG models, you will find that sometimes the character doesn't appear to be looking at where the target is. This is pretty common because we tend to model these characters with their eyeballs a little bit too large inside the skull to get the sort of cartoony, appealing look, and that throws off the direction of the eyes. So you see here, for example, it doesn't really look like she's looking at that eye target. It looks like she's looking at the kid, even though the eye target is somewhere else. So it doesn't matter where the actual target is. What matters is if the character's eye line looks correct in the camera. So you want to do whatever you have to do to cheat that to get that to look right. So yes, I've animated eye direction, some eye darts, and some blinks. Let's take a look at the play blast.
Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What?
You can see that just by adding in the eye direction and a couple of blinks there, the shot really starts to come to life. She really seems to be a thinking, emotional character rather than just a puppet moving around. At the beginning here, she's just listening to what her friend is saying on the phone, and then we can see around frame 12 or 13, the eyes change direction. Something's caught her attention. She heard something that maybe she didn't like, and so maybe she's a little surprised there. I might add in a little bit of a take in the eyes. And then she says, are we taking this too far? And you can see the eyes are darting around. She's kind of searching in her head for the answer, for what she's going to say next. And then with this big eye direction right here, we can see that she's arrived at what she's going to say. She's made her decision. And notice how the head is holding perfectly still there, so we can really maximize the read of that eye direction change. And then she goes into a nice slow blink here. It's very voluntary blink, a very relaxed blink as she assumes this sort of superior attitude. And the fact that the nose is tilting up but the eyes are looking down really enforces that attitude. Even though we haven't posed the rest of the face, just that relationship of the eye direction to the angle of the head tells us about the attitude of the character. She says, I don't think we've gone far enough. And then she looks to the toilet paper that she's grabbing. She follows it as it goes into the cart there. And then I've added a blink here, the second blink for the change of eye direction, which is another good place to put a blink. Going from the toilet paper to the kid here. And then just a really subtle reaction here. I haven't added anything in the face here. I want this to be a really subtle, kind of a Chuck Jones reaction to the kid staring at her there. I did reference some of my own video for the timing of the eye direction and the blinks, in particular for the slow blink going into the second attitude where she makes her decision. So in particular, paying attention to the bottom clip here, I noticed that the eyes started to close around frame 78, and once they were closed, they stayed closed till about 85, and then they slowly opened up there. And that's pretty much the timing that I used on her to get that attitude and to time that transition between the two emotions. So this is one example where I found following the video reference to be really helpful for making it feel natural. Let's talk a bit about timing of eye movement, because it's kind of unique to the character how the eyes move and the way they accelerate and decelerate. If we zoom in on some of these splines here for the eyes, you'll notice that they're very sharp. Sometimes they'll move in one frame. So this is a very small distance for the eyes to travel, so I did it in one frame. I felt that was okay. You know, maybe if you wanted to, you could give it one little frame of cushion if it feels a little too sharp. But generally, for a small eye dart like that, one frame is okay. Any other time that my eyes move, though, the pupils move, you always want them to, well, there's that word always, I don't want to use that, but you generally want them to fast out. You want the eyes to move ballistically, like they're exploding out of a hold. So it can be a linear motion coming out of the held, and then it can be a little bit of cushion into the next pose. But you don't need much. Eyes can move very quickly and very precisely, unlike most other parts of our body. They don't need time to accelerate and decelerate because they're just rotating. They're not actually shifting their mass. And also the muscles in the eyeballs are very fine-tuned and very agile. So the eyes can move very quickly, very accurately, and they can stop and start on a frame. For the biggest eye change here, where she's looking to the side there, I did this in 1, 2 frames, and then a third frame of cushion. That felt pretty natural to me. Later on over here, where the eye change is more gradual, well, it's behind her lids, you can't tell. But in this case, I let the eyes just kind of follow along a little bit more with what the skull was doing. Because she's not looking at anything in particular through this transition. She's more internal and just feeling superior, so it's not really that important where the eyes land. But then here, I'll throw in a little dart. In this case, I did a 2-frame transition. I should have done a fast out here, so let's go ahead and break that down. And I'm just going to take the in-between here and favor it towards the next pose. So we get a fast out and a cushion in, like that. Okay, same thing here. She does another little eye dart right here where she's looking at the toilet paper. I'll just break those down and favor them towards the next pose. So this is a nice, sharp little eye dart there. The rest of this stuff is kind of the eyes traveling through space as she's following the toilet paper. The head's moving quite a lot here, so the audience isn't really going to notice any darts or anything through there, so I just didn't really bother. Just try to generally keep the eyes following what they're looking at. And then again here, for the eye direction change when she looks to the kid, you can see that I have a fast out here. There's no acceleration. It's immediately top speed, and then it cushions in to the final pose here. And here there's a little bit of drift because the head's turning as well, so I had to adjust the direction of the eyes subtly as the head turns. But otherwise, it's a very snappy movement there. I should also mention that eyeballs, pupils, generally do not arc. Generally, they move in a straight line to whatever they're looking at. They move in a very direct manner. There might be an instance here or there where you might want to arc the eyes, like if you're doing an eye roll or some sort of exaggerated effect. But in general, they tend to move in a linear fashion. Of course, it is a sphere rotating, so you might get some implied arcs here and there. But for the most part, you can just treat the transition from pose A to pose B as a straight line. I'm going to demonstrate here how to animate a simple blink. Blinks are really great for helping to communicate thought process and for breaking up movements and attitudes on the character. In this case, there's a moment here where there's a little change of eye direction right there, where she's going from looking down to looking up and slightly to her left. Seems like a good place for a blink. I'm going to go ahead and put one in here. Alright, I'll start the blink around frame 11. And I'm just going to use the main top lid and bottom lid controllers. This is a sort of standard vanilla blink, if you will, so I'm going to have the lids close in 2 frames. In this case, I'll have the top lids come most of the way down. And then I will have the bottom lids come up just a little bit. In an actual real-life human blink, the bottom lids are barely involved at all. They don't really come up so much. The top lids do just about all of it. But because in animation we're often dealing with very large, exaggerated eyes, it's kind of nice to bring up the bottom lid to help it do the work of closing the eye shape. Alright, so we're closing in 2 frames, and I'm going to hold it closed for an extra frame so that we have 2 frames closed. And I don't want to just keep the same position that I had on the previous frame. I want to keep those eyes moving a little bit through that closed shape. So I'm going to have that top lid continue to push down on that bottom lid there. And then I'm going to go about, let's go about 8 frames ahead, and we'll go to back to our open position. Alright, I'll just copy the pose from the open there. So there's some basic blink for you, but this is just the poses. The timing and the spacing aren't quite right, because right now the splines are all just interpolating automatically. There's no favoring, there's no ease in and ease out, so the blink doesn't really feel natural. You'll notice as the top lids come down here, it's only a 2 frame closing here, and you'll notice that on the frame in between, the top lids are right in between the open and closed position, so it's like a halfway. And generally, we don't like that in animation. You either want to favor the previous pose or favor the next pose. You want it to be an ease out or an ease into the next pose. In this case, I want it to be an ease out of the open pose. So I'm going to pull back on these top lids a bit so they're kind of accelerating, and then they're going to close really quickly. So there's a little bit of acceleration there, and then boom, they slam closed. And that fast into the closed shape there helps make it feel like they're colliding with the bottom lids. They were stopped by another force interacting with them. So you want to favor your open shape and then close it, push down for another frame just to keep the eyelids alive during that closed shape, and then we're going to open back up here. And again, all these in-betweens are even. It's almost linear because that's what the computer gives us by default. So we don't want to do that. We want to give this a nice long cushion into the open pose. So let me just grab the lower lids too. And in the graph editor here, I'm just going to break those down, and I'm going to favor that open position. Really favor it like that, so we get a nice soft ease in right there. It just really cushions in for about 4 frames. So this is the basis for a standard blink. And for a shot that's far away, you know, maybe a medium shot or a wide shot, this is probably all you need. But since we are in a close-up here, we can go ahead and layer in a little bit more detail. One thing we can do is add a little bit of squash and stretch to the eye. We can select overall controls for the eyes here and just add a little bit of scaling to them, like so, just to squash them a little bit. So it's a 2-frame squash, and then as they open up again, I'll have it relax back to normal. So it's a pretty subtle effect, but I more want the audience to feel it rather than see it. Another thing we can do is add a little bit of movement in the corners of the eyes. Something that actually happens in the real human eye, because the muscles controlling most of the lid behavior is a circular muscle that surrounds the entire eye. It's called the orbicularis oculi, and the whole thing kind of constricts. So when you're squeezing your eyes closed, this whole ring of muscle around the eye is constricting, and that involves a little bit of movement in the corner there as well. So as the eyes, if you watch like a slow motion eyelid blink in close up, you know, you'll notice that the corners of the eyes actually move in a little bit like that. And then just make sure to key it back off when you're done. It's pretty subtle. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty subtle. Another thing you could do is break up the lid shape so it doesn't maintain the same arc the whole way down. For example, on this in-between right here, you could come in with one of your shapers, or in this case I think I'll just use the overall lid control here, and just kind of pull the inner down a little bit more and delay the outer a little bit, so it feels like there's a little, so that it feels like the blink is kind of leading from the inside of the eye there, and the outer part is dragging a little bit. It's just a subtle shape change there, but it's kind of nice. I'll do it on the other eye too. Just in this case, it leaves a little bit of this X-translate control just to favor the curve to the outer part of the eye, so it feels like it's dragging a little bit. Boom, they close, and then on the way open we can do the opposite. We can pull the curve towards the inner part of the eye, so it feels like the inner lid is leading and the outer part is following a little bit. So it gives the blink almost a little bit of a rhythmic closing, like there's a little bit of an overlap to it. So it almost feels like a wave traveling through the lid instead of just the whole lid moving at the same speed. Maybe it's a little more exaggerated than what happens in real life, but again, animation is caricature, is exaggeration, so this just helps add a little extra fleshiness to it. If you wanted to, you could add in a little bit of movement in the brows. I tend to not do that if it's an involuntary blink that just happens naturally. If the character is blinking on purpose, then I might add a little bit of eyebrows in there to make it feel like it has more intent behind it. But otherwise, I feel like if the eyebrows move every time the eyes blink, it could get really monotonous and distracting to look at. I'm blocking in her basic facial expressions right now. I've gone ahead and brought in the thumbnails for the 3 basic attitudes that I want. These sort of surprise there, and then this more smug attitude here, and finally the nervous attitude at the end. There's actually another attitude right at the beginning before she hits the first attitude, because I want to see her go from a little bit more of a neutral place into this first attitude here. Although actually not starting so much neutral. I'm imagining that she's on the phone, she's in this conversation, she's already not happy with the way that it's going, so I decided to put a little bit of frustration or tension already on her face, so that she's not just starting in a neutral pose. She's already coming in with a bit of an attitude. I brought the brows down to make them a little bit frustrated. I shaped the top lids and flattened those out just a little bit. So they match a bit of the brows, and you can see we're getting a little bit of a peak here. I did the same thing with the bottom lids, just bias those to one side. And I put the mouth in a little bit of a frown there, and posed the jaw a little bit open, since she's going to be talking, and I didn't want her jaw to look too tense. I've also rotated the bottom teeth, so they're a little bit flatter, so that we don't see so much of the molars from the camera view here. Just a little 2D trick there. And I've gone ahead with the nose and actually just pointed that a little bit more to screen left as well, just to give a little bit more perspective to that. So now I'm going to go into the first thumbnail here. I've got her kind of holding this expression for the first 30 frames or so.
Are we taking this too far?
So I want her to hit this expression, the first thumbnail, when she says far. Actually, I want her to hit it a little bit in advance of that. She really accents the word far, and I like to have my facial expression changes precede the accents a little bit. So it happens on the face first, and then the rest of the body follows through, and the dialogue follows through. So just another way to show thought process is to precede your actions by changing the face and the eyes first. I also don't want to do the change
Too far? Too far.
right on this big head move right here, because it'll be harder for the audience to see that change if the head's moving while it happens. So I want to do it in a little still space right before that head move. I'll just go ahead and step like maybe 5 frames ahead or so, and set another key on all the facial controls, except for the eye direction stuff. I'm kind of leaving that how it was from my initial eye pass. I don't want to mess with eye direction stuff, but all the expression stuff in the face, I'm keying that. So we're essentially going to go pose to pose on the face, even though I did the body in more of a layered fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the brows. I'm just going to reset the brows back to their default. And I really want to raise up these inner brows here. Sometimes I'll manipulate a whole bunch of controls at the same time just for convenience, but you got to be careful with that because you don't want your expressions to be too symmetrical. And I just want to compare those brows to see how they can move in and out of that pose. That feels pretty good. The outer brow maybe could move a little bit more up there. Let's just translate that up. There we go. There's not really a lot of muscle controlling that outer brow. It kind of just follows along with what the rest of the brow is doing, the middle section and the inner section. But anatomically, we don't really have a lot of control over this outer piece right here. It's more just sitting on the flesh that gets pulled around with the rest of the brow. Most of your change is going to be happening on the inner part of the brow, and then quite a bit in the middle part. Okay, so we've got a change happening in the brows here. So we're going to change the lids too, of course. Eyes are going to go to wider because she's kind of widening her eyes like in this mock surprise. But also because the brows are pulling up on the eyelids, they're going to change shape subtly. They're going to go from this angular shape here, where you can feel the tension of the brows causing the eyelids to change shape, to a softer shape here, where the eyelids are going to kind of echo the shape of the brows, these rounder shapes. And I think I'll use the lid X translate here just to pull it up a little bit more in the middle. Nice soft shapes in the eyes. I think I'll drop the bottom lids a little bit too. So she's kind of putting on an exaggerated face here, and just to get more contrast from the previous expression. Another thing we can do on this rig, which is really nice, is she has these shapers for the eye socket in here. Not a lot of rigs have this, but she does, and it's pretty nice. So I can try to get some more roundness in this as well. Again, with the goal of just kind of echoing what the brows are doing. Okay, so we're getting some nice shape changes in the eyes. And I could push it a little further. I could have it overshoot. I could put in some more squash and stretch. But right now we're just in the blocking phase, so I'm just looking for some nice held poses that I can put into these expressions. Let's look at the mouth next. She's gonna say far, and the jaw's gonna open up. So even though I'm not doing lip sync right here, I do feel like the dominant expression is gonna be this open mouth here. Let me just reset some of this lip stuff here. I do like to start with a clean slate a lot of times. Otherwise, there might be some controls that are set that are left behind that I just forgot to key, and they end up messing up the pose a little bit. I'm going to start by posing the corners down again. I don't want it equidistant between the top and bottom. I like to favor one or the other so it's closer to a frown or closer to a smile. And then, yeah, we want to get away from the football shape or any kind of really symmetrical shape. Not just symmetrical vertically or horizontally, but vertically as well. So right now both sides of the mouth are doing the same thing. The most important view, of course, is the camera view over here. Let me just zoom in on this. And we want to get this mouth more asymmetrical. So I'm just going to pull in this side, kind of cheat that back in. Okay. And I'm going to take the lip controllers and I'm going to cheat them off to screen left a little bit, just kind of favoring their curves over to screen left. Maybe pull this one up a little bit too, so we're not seeing too much teeth there. Maybe pull it back against the teeth a little bit too. I can see there's a little bit of a gap against the teeth there, so I'm just going to pull that back. Do I want to hide the top teeth? Well, right now I just see a little bit of that sliver of top teeth, and I don't like that. I either want to show them or I want to hide them, but I don't want something in the between where you just see that tiny little bit of white peeking out. It's just not graphically clear. I feel like we should probably cover the top teeth for this. I feel like that's looking pretty good. Actually, let's loosen up the face a little bit. Let's just add a little bit more line of action to the face and try to curve it off to the screen right a little bit here. Okay, now we've got a little bit more of a curved line of action to the face there. Let's go ahead and exaggerate these up a little bit. And I'm losing a little bit of the length of the brows between the two shapes there. That feels better. It's important to note that when the brows go up, they also go out. They don't just move in straight up and down lines. They converge, especially the inner parts of the brows, they converge towards the bridge of the nose. They don't just go straight down towards the eyes. You know what? I might add a little bit of a sneer to this pose. So it's not just like a straight up surprise pose. There's a little bit of judgment in it too. Like, seriously? Bar? You're really going to do that? So I think if I put a little bit of something in the top lip and in the nose, I can get a little bit of that attitude in there. Okay. And if I'm going to sneer the lip like that, I need to put a little bit of that in the nose, I feel. So I'll just put little sneers here. You pull the nostril out. That gives the expression a little more asymmetry too, which is nice.
It's too far.
Alright, so I'm going to hold the expression here. But I am going to relax out of it a little bit just because I think that open mouth is going to get a little distracting. So let's just go ahead and close that jaw a bit. And where do I want that expression change to happen? I think it'll happen right around the time of this blink here. So the blink will kind of be the trigger that causes the cascade of the face into the new expression. I'm going to set the face to default again here. Alright, I'm going to move through this kind of quickly, but I'll talk about any things I think are important. I'm trying to get a nice flat graphic line across the bottom lip here. I like to play a complex curve like this top lip here that has this S shape against a simple flat curve on the bottom when I can. I'll notice also that I rotated the teeth so that the line of the teeth is very similar to the bottom lip. It just gets the molars out of the way and gives a cleaner graphic shape. I'm using the X-Translate controls on the lips to favor the shape more to screen left, just to kind of push the perspective a little bit more, and also to add more asymmetry to the pose. I'm using these larger head translates and squash and stretch controls just to add a little bit of movement to the overall shape of the head. Hopefully not too much that the audience will really notice it, or that it'll make her feel like she lacks structure, like there's not bone under here. We want her to feel solid, but we do want to loosen her up. Now that I've got this pose looking the way that I want it, I'm going to work a little bit on the timing of it. As I mentioned before, I want it to start with the blink. Right now, the transition of that expression is taking a long time. It's taking almost 20 frames long, which is too long. I want to go ahead and make that a little bit snappier. So for the controls that are not involved in the blink, I'll just select those and have them arrive a bit sooner. If you haven't noticed by now, I don't really bother with the Bezier handles, with the tangent handles on my splines. I pretty much leave everything in auto tangent and then just add more keys where I need to. I just don't like to have more information to keep track of. I'd rather just know where my keys are, add more as I need them, and not worry about pushing and pulling handles. Alright, so I've got this expression change in there now. And we're going to hold this pose until the next blink. You'll notice that I put the screen right eyebrow lower than the screen left eyebrow. Very often, we might open the side of the face that's on the side where the eyes are looking. So for example, if she's looking to screen right, I might open up that screen right eyebrow and that screen right lid a little bit more to give it a sense of directionality to reinforce her eye direction. I'm doing a bit of the opposite because she's looking at something and she's having a judgmental reaction to it. She doesn't like what she's seeing. She's skeptical of this kid that's staring at her. So in this case, I put the brow on the side of the face that she's looking at downward, as if she's closing off this side of the face and kind of rejecting what she's seeing. It's the difference between observation and judgment on her part. Here's another little graphic tweak that I want to make. You notice how her right ear, the screen left ear, is just poking out just a little bit there. And I think that just makes it a little less graphically clear. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate that back. So it's just out of the way. It's kind of the thing where you either want to see it or you don't. Here's a play blast of the blocking so far with my facial expressions.
Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What? Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What?
Not sure why all the toilet paper turned black there, but that's a problem for a later time. I'm thinking maybe she looks a little bit too angry at the beginning here. I wanted her to maybe look a little bit more confused or frustrated, but not so angry. And then I think I'm going to need a little bit of change in here as she builds up to the far, this open expression right here. I feel like I'm going to need like a little bit of a something in between here, maybe just a bridging attitude to get between those two so it's not just going from 0 to 100% there. And I'm thinking I might want to try to work in a little bit of a smile somewhere in here, even if it's a sarcastic smile, just to add a little variety to the scene. I'm liking this transition here, although I could probably use a breakdown because I feel like the screen right eyebrow is moving a lot on its own and the screen left eyebrow is not doing much. So I think a breakdown pose in there would help to make that feel more natural. At the end here, I feel like maybe her reaction to the kid in the face is a little too soon. I could probably delay that another 3 or 4 frames and still be in advance of the dialogue. And maybe I won't hit this sort of funny ooh shape in the mouth right away. Maybe I'll have the mouth be a little bit more like it was in the previous expression, and then I'll bring in that funny mouth shape for the dialogue, for the what. Here I've decided to add a little bit of a take in the brows. Something that I saw that I did in the video reference. If you look at the top one there, right before I react, there's a little bit of a brow raise with a blink, and then the expression comes back down. So it just adds like almost a little micro expression change there in reaction to what she hears on the phone. So I think that might be a nice way to break up that first phrase to go along that blink. So a sharp up on the brows and then a soft settle back into the expression. Maybe I won't come all the way back to that first expression. Maybe I will just come part of the way back. So maybe I'll come about 30% back towards that expression. And here I want to add a breakdown between these two expressions, just so that one eyebrow doesn't feel like it's moving in isolation. And the simplest way to add a breakdown for the brows is just to have them come down a bit. So it gives you a little bit of a squash or a little bit of anticipation. And then they can go back up into the second pose. I think I'm going to address the position of this inner brow here because it doesn't seem to connect to the other brow, the left brow, screen left brow, as much as I'd like. I'd like to have a little bit more flow through my brow shapes, so I just want to adjust the position of that inner brow there. Just bring that up a little bit higher, like so. There, now I feel like it's pointing towards the other brow a little bit better. They feel a bit more connected. And we'll find a new mouth shape for here before she goes into the wet face. Right, I'm just going to take this pose and favor it back to the previous one, just in the mouth, and close the jaw a bit more. Yeah, I kind of like that. I think I'll do that for the whole face. And I'll take just this pose here and favor it back towards the previous one. Yeah, and then I'll close the jaw a bit more and find some parts of this expression change to overshoot. So I'll do the brows first. Maybe I'll do the eyes too, the eyelids. Alright, this is still pretty blocky, so I haven't really gotten into things like lead and follow on the brows, offsetting the features from each other, like offsetting the eyes and brows from the mouth and nose a little bit. That'll come later as I start to polish and as I start to get into lip sync. But let's take a look at the overall performance now. Here's the play blast of the latest version.
Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What? Are we taking this too far? You know what? I don't think we're taking this far enough. What?
So one thing that I didn't record, but a change that I made, is adding a little bit of smile into this first expression here. As I mentioned, looking at the previous play blast, I figured it could use a little bit of levity so she just wasn't in a serious, stern attitude the whole time. I wanted to get a little bit of smile in there just for fun. And when I did that, I first did it to this pose, and then I felt I needed to adjust the brow pose a little bit to make them a little bit softer, a little bit more up in the center. And then I felt like I needed to bring the smile in a little bit earlier. So right here, she's starting to build into that sarcastic attitude instead of just changing everything in this attitude. So the smile creeps in a little bit there. I added a little bit more upward turn in the center brow there. So just to give a little bit of that sarcastic kind of disbelief at what she's hearing. Looking at it now, a few notes that I'll give to myself. I just feel like this little take in the brows, I could probably tone that down a little bit, and it looks like the inner part of the brow comes up and hits and stops here and then sticks there while the rest of the brow comes down. So I can probably smooth that out and make that feel more natural. And then the antic here, this breakdown coming down, I could probably tone that down a bit as well too. I don't think it needs to overshoot that much. because for one thing, I think it'll compete with this right here, the sharpness of the brows coming down there. So at this point, I feel like the blocking is far enough along, I can go ahead and start polishing things. One thing I should note, if we look at Maya here, is that if I select all her face controls, you'll notice that my keys are very organized, and for the most part, everything is broken down at the same on the same frames. The only places where I've got some extra in-betweens is stuff where I was sculpting the blinks and adding some spacing choices into there. The rest of it is all just pose to pose, so it's really easy to work with. From here, though, the keys are going to get a lot messier. I'm going to start shifting stuff around, adding more breakdowns for ease-ins and overshoots and things like that. So it's not going to be as organized, and I'll definitely be offsetting keys forward and backward in time.